Hi there, welcome to the Pod Like a Pro podcast, where we share tips and tricks all about podcasting. And we also talk to fellow podcasters to see how they're doing it, all in the name of helping you to podcast like the professionals. I'm Liz Clarkson from Pod and Pen Productions, recording this episode on the lands of the Awabakal people. Today, we're talking about making a podcast in a studio with producers to create a platform for the greater good. And I'm going to talk about all of this with the host of the Law Matters podcast, Catherine Henry. Catherine has been a client of Pod and Pen Productions for quite a long time now, and she makes a podcast around social issues with a focus on the work that her firm does around medical negligence. Catherine, thanks for taking some time to talk to me today.
Thank you so much, Liz.
So I wanted to go behind the scenes a little bit of your podcast today to give people some insight into how it's done. And we make this podcast, the Law Matters podcast, in a studio, in this studio that we're in right now. What's it like for you to be able to come into a recording studio and I guess make this podcast? Is it enjoyable?
Yeah, I find it enjoyable because of who I'm dealing with, I guess. I'm really feeling quite comfortable in the space. I can't say that I'm a natural interviewee with the headphones, but no, I find the whole structure and what you bring to the process, I find that enjoyable. And I've not ever been in a recording studio, but I like the interaction we have. I like the fact that we're able to showcase the work that we do and present a human focus to the work that we do. And I feel that, the work, obviously I would say this, I feel that the work that we do at the firm is very interesting and challenging work and meaningful to many people. All the work that we do, it has a social justice objective and theme. And I like the fact that I'm able to talk about the work that we do in that personal way with you, and I feel that the work that we do, the messages that we get out, and the trying to set ourselves up as thought leaders in the work that in the practice areas that we take on. I feel it's really important to make a contribution and to provide information and to be seen as a community resource. And this podcast is a vehicle for that. And I've always tried to make the content, whether it's posting on our blog, whether it's the information sheets, whether it's articles that we submit to various magazines, and now the podcast over the last 18 months or whatever it is that we've been working with you. I like it to be really informative and to have a really good high quality and to really, not just talk inanely. It's not a humorous podcast. We're not talking, I've heard some lawyers podcasts and they, come in and have a joke. We might, I don't see myself as wanting to go down that path because the work that we do is pretty, it's important serious. And serious work.
Yeah,
and challenging for the lawyers, and we're seeing clients in a very vulnerable state. I suppose that is common to all the work that we do at the firm. So I really like the fact that I'm dealing with people like you have such a good background for this podcast. You've been a producer and been involved in interviewing at the ABC for a long period of time, as has Nate, and I like that. I like the fact that the quality that I've aspired to have is able to be continued through working with you in particular.
And we do really enjoy getting into these topics as well, because they are challenging, very challenging topics, the work that you do in medical negligence. And I'm going to play a little bit of the podcast back to you in just a moment, if that's okay, so that people can get an idea of those topics. But I think that you do approach them really, really well and really thoughtfully, so that it is something that becomes a space for knowledge sharing, and in a way that there are certain people that that other people in the law fields and just in general, very accomplished people that are not necessarily always all that accessible. So it's lovely to get them on the podcast, and that's a really enjoyable thing for us as producers as well.
Good.
I'd love to play a little bit of your podcast back to you. So this was a moment from an episode, and I know that you'll remember this because this was a really emotional interview for everybody who was in the room that day, and this was with ABC journalist Jamelle Wells. And she told this story. We're doing an episode on regional health and where regional health has some failings. And obviously that's a lot of where your clients, your work comes from is things that have gone wrong in regional New South Wales. And she told this story of her father who had a fall, had a broken hip, and he actually died at the end of that. And I've got a little bit of that episode to play back to you now.
We felt there was a presumption against life for my dad from the start. He was treated, because of his age, as someone who just didn't matter, and they couldn't wait to get rid of him.
I'm just so incredibly sorry to hear that story. I've read the evidence that you've given and I've heard the story that you've told to the media, but it's just so shocking from the earliest time, from his discharge from Dubbo to the way in which he was sent to the aged care facility. You've told how you wished that you were more strident and, spoken out more at the time, but you just felt that you were in this terrible situation, just living from day to day. How do you and members of your family feel about what happened to your father 3 years down the track?
It is still very painful, Catherine, and it's the sort of thing, I think about it every day. I think there's anyone who sees those things happen to a loved one who is in a hospital. I saw my father resuscitated. I saw him in pain. I saw him begging for things. And I think I will never forget those images, will never go from my mind. But time lets you live with it and you put it in a different place. You bury it a little bit deeper.
So that was Jamelle Wells generously sharing her very personal story with us. And I do remember that day so well. And as we were talking about, your podcast is a platform for social justice. And I just think it's quite interesting because traditionally, and I know that you've done a lot of media work, say with the ABC as well, you've been interviewed quite a number of times, but traditionally we have to wait for the traditional media to identify something as an issue and identify who they want to talk to, and then that becomes a platform for something to be talked about. But with podcasting, with the Law Matters podcast that you've made, you've been able to create a platform for yourself for these really important issues. How does that feel as part of this whole process?
Yeah, you're right. It is a proactive position, like regional health, as we just heard. Jamelle just makes me emotional listening to it. What's happening in the coronial system? Avoidable deaths, institutional abuse. Yes, we can read about it. We can read about some of the issues that come up, summaries of cases if you're a lawyer. But I'd like the fact that we're talking in a very directed way with people who are really top of their game and who have many decades of insight to share. And I guess the reason we've been able to secure some really impressive individuals is because we've worked together and, we go back some period of time. And I think that, what I try to do in my practice as a lawyer is to show that we care. I think if you show that you deeply care about your clients and about issues that are involved in the client's cases, that you're doing something, that you're fulfilling a really important objective, and I feel that the podcast is an extension of that.
I can only imagine for clients coming to you in these really vulnerable states that knowing that you do actually really truly care is a very important part of the process?
Yeah, sometimes just sort of saying to a client, I saw someone a couple of days ago who just has a very, very hard life with a, an almost 30-year-old son with, profoundly disabled. And I just said, I'm just so sorry that all of this has happened to you, and people generally break down at that point. So but it's just to feel like, I do think it's, you hear stories about clients whose experience with lawyers is to be sent a document, request for further and better particulars, or a document that they're required to provide their input into with answers. And there are ways of getting or extracting that information from clients and making the process seem more personal and human. And I think that that's really important. So I do try to bring. And I think it's like everybody at the firm, we often get thanked for the kindness that we've shown during what is a really tough time in every area. And I think that's I'm really pleased about that.
Absolutely. Let's talk just a little more about the podcast to wrap things up, because I know that working with us as podcast producers, we organise the studio for you, and we organise the guests, and we write some scripts and do some of the research, but we can't do all of it for you because you have to be sort of engaged in the topic. You're the host, you do have to do that little bit of research and think about what you want
preparation.
Yeah. But it does strike me that you get to sit down with often people who you've known for a very long time and perhaps have not spoken to for some time, and you get to sit down in this situation and really talk through issues with these
leaders in their field.
How is that for you?
Well, I think it's a great privilege, but I also would like to make the point that it's not just me doing the interviewing. I feel that it's been a good platform for others in the firm, and I have some impressive individuals who work for me and with me, and I think it's important to involve everybody in the podcast, because as a practitioner, I've always worked in the medical and health field, and that's something that I feel very comfortable with and in. But when it comes to things like institutional abuse or family law, it's not something that comes naturally to me. So I'm very happy to hand the baton on. But yes, I have, we've had some really eminent individuals, and I think that's been, I have felt very honoured that they have said yes when they've been asked.
Just one final question. Any tips you have for other businesses or organisations who might be thinking about making a podcast alongside a production company like ours?
Well, I would strongly advocate using or utilising, I should say, professionals. I feel that you get a much better product. I think it's probably easy to establish a podcast, but I think it needs to be professional. I didn't personally want to do a podcast unless it was a really high-quality product, which I feel I've been successful with, given your business and the fact that you bring decades of experience organising interviews with the ABC, and so I guess my advice to lawyers who are wanting to move into this space, as a way of for whatever reason, building your personal brand, making a contribution and positioning yourself as an authority in a particular area, I feel that it's something that requires professional input, and I think the quality of the product will be a lot better if you work with people who know what they're doing. There we are. There's a good plug for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you so much for all the work that you do and for working with us. It's a true pleasure, and thanks for talking to me today.
Pleasure. And thank you, Liz.
Now, make sure you check out the Law Matters podcast. I'll pop a link in the show notes. And if you'd like to find out more about working with us to create a professional podcast for your business or organisation, head to podandpen.com.au to find out more. Until next time, happy listening.